The first time I ever had my first sexual experience with a girl was at Aunt Audrey's house. I was probably 8, maybe 9 years old.
Welcome to the Recovery Valve Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Kennedy. Today's episode is brought to you by Bagwell Insurance, Barrow Walden, Tree Guys with Ties, and a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Valve Podcast.
So I think that as I tell, because I've been asked a lot to tell my story in addiction recovery, and I hate telling it sometimes because it is very heavy, and I hate the heaviness of addiction. But then there's also, I feel like people need to hear how validated I am through, the struggles of addiction. And so I want to start out by saying that some of the things I'm going to say may not bring a light to my family, but I have to say this. My parents are very, very good people. I think they did what they thought was best. I was born in 1979. We were very middle to lower class, I guess. I don't even know what that meant in the late 70s or early 80s, but we lived in a trailer, a mobile home trailer. We moved from one in upstate South Carolina. I was born in a small town in a town called Abbeville, South Carolina. And then we moved and I lived in Wagner. We lived in a trailer there, and then we moved to another trailer in Wagner, but I stayed in Wagner until I graduated. I think that was a goal that my parents wanted. My mom and dad met when they were real young. I would say probably late teens, and fell in love and knew they wanted to be together. They've been together for, I think, close to almost 50 years. And they were a working class group. My dad was in construction. My mom worked in a sewing room. And yeah, they did the best they could. I have one brother, no sisters. I'll say I'm trying to be as transparent as I can so that people can relate, because that's what I want. I want people to relate. I just don't want to throw anybody under the bus or feelings to get hurt. But there were times in my childhood that I can remember it was rough or tough. My parents separated a few times. I remember my mom stayed in a shelter at one point to kind of hide from my dad. And I remember my dad lived in an apartment at one point in another town where he grew up at. I think that was, I hated to say it, kind of made me happy to see my parents divorce, but I remember, them fighting, and I remember my dad drinking, and I remember my mom seemed to be happier when they weren't together. And so them being separated probably is what made me happy. Because the first Nintendo we got was when they were separated, and I remember getting a trampoline when they were separated. So it wasn't a showboat thing. I think at the time it was like, this is what my dad was trying to show. Like, I can be different, or I can be better because I bring this to the family. My childhood was not bad. There were just some tough times. My brother and I, we got along. There's a 5-year age gap, and I remember going to the same babysitter in town, and we went there when school was out and after school. Probably, I don't remember the full extent. I remember catching the bus from this person's house. We called her Aunt Audrey. Her name was Audrey, but we called her Audrey because of her accent. and she took care of a lot of kids that I still know today. And the first time I ever had my first sexual experience with a girl was at Aunt Audrey's house. I was probably 8, maybe 9 years old. I didn't know what was happening, but yeah, it was, I'll take that back. I knew what was happening, but I didn't understand the impact it had on me mentally to have oral sex with her that little, and to do things when people weren't looking or when kids were taking naps. I just chalked that off. It wasn't like a big deal. And I never told anybody about that until I wrote a book last year, and I mentioned it for the first time. And if you go through, my elementary and middle school life, I mean, everything was, like I said, I grew up in a small town called Wagner, South Carolina. I tried to be friends with everybody that I knew. We lived over by the middle school. So when Wagner, before it was segregated, the African-American kids went to A.L. Corbett, which was the all-black school, and then all the white kids went to Wagner Sally High. I guess that was the names of those schools back then. But anyway, when segregation was lifted, Corbett became the middle school, and then Wagner Sally became the elementary and the high school. And we lived over by Corbett Middle School. So it was predominantly African-American side of town, which didn't bother me. I mean, generationally, I think racism was a thing, but it wasn't for me. A lot of my friends were black and white, and I had that in high school. I mean, a lot of my friends, like I hung out with everybody, and I think that I wanted to do that because I didn't like the small town vibe. I didn't like. I think I didn't like it because I could just see what it did to my mom and dad, and I think I just wanted more. I didn't want that to be the only thing. I just wanted to see what was out there. We didn't travel. We didn't do vacations, any of that kind of stuff whenever I was little. We went on one trip to Dollywood that I recall, and that was it. We had one. No, we've never had any family pictures made until last year. But when my mom was separated from my dad took us to a church one time, and we had pictures made, just me, him, and Travis. And then there was a time when I was in high school, I had pictures taken with my mom and my brother, and I was stoned in that picture. And she's got it hanging up, and I don't know if I ever told her I was stoned in that picture. So that's enough about like me and my past. So I feel like I need to tell my first time drinking, my first time using a harder drug, my first time using a drug harder than that drug, and when I thought I was an addict. So if I go back to my first, I remember asking my dad to try a sip of his beer when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. He may not remember this, but I remember it because we were at a buddy of his house, and they were hanging out, and I asked him, and I just remember it had like this fizzy burn taste to it. I also tried dip for the first time, and it made me sick that same day. So I mean, I say that I tried that because I didn't get drunk from it or, high from it or whatever. Just, I tried it. The first time I got drunk was, I was in 8th grade. I got invited to hang out with some guys that I wanted to kind of be cool with. I was picked on by some of this group, and so I wanted to fit in with them. They were older than me, and I kind of wanted to fit in because like the next year I was going to high school. And these kids were, I just didn't want them to beat me up, so I got invited to come hang out at this party one time. I was in 8th grade, and I started drinking. It was Mountain Dew and some kind of brown liquor. It had, I want to say it was called Canadian Hunter. It had a man on the front of the bottle and a dog. And so I want to say it was Canadian Hunter. And I drank 3 of those mixed drinks in a solo cup. And man, I was smashed. I was completely hammered. So much so that I was passed out on his mom's couch, and I remember puking in the cushions of her couch. One of the guys had a pet snake. For what reason, I have no idea. I don't know who has pet snakes, but this guy had a pet snake. And they put that snake, and I'm scared to death of snakes. I am terrified of a snake. And they went and put that snake on me when I was passed out. I just remember like coming to during that drunk, like waking up and being in puke, or waking up and a snake tongue in my face, or waking up and those guys kind of like laughing. And to me, I thought I was fitting in doing that. So I don't think that worked. I didn't make any extra friends from doing that. But I, for some reason, enjoyed it. I didn't continue like drinking, but I did continue to always want to hang out with the older crowd. So when I went into my freshman year, I had met a girl over the summer, going from 8th grade to 9th grade. This would be my very, very first girlfriend, like legit girlfriend. She lived in a different town, and back then we didn't have any phones or email, so we actually wrote each other letters. And I still remember her mailing address now. And I would go to her house. My parents would drive me up to her house on the weekends. And there were some weekends, like, you know, like kids go and like spend the night with their friends. Like I would go and stay the weekend with her. Now I wouldn't sleep anywhere near her bedroom, but I would sleep on the couch in the living room because it was like an hour drive. But that's how we dated. I would get in trouble for running up my mom's phone bill. That was my first girlfriend. And we dated off and on for a long time. I think even when I was 30, after my wife and I separated, I went back to this girl just to see what she was up to. But going into high school, I had that first drunk. And I remember like doing stupid stuff. Like we would go to the state fair, and the night before we would go to the state fair, because if you were in the FFA in Wagner, South Carolina, you had to go to one meeting a month, the FFA meeting. But then if you went to the meeting, you could do the trip. And the trips were always fun in high school. You would go roller skating or the movies or to the state fair, different things like that would get you out of school. And so that was why I joined the FFA. I didn't join the FFA to be some farmer. I had no intentions of being a farmer. I did it to hang out with the girls and to be able to get out of school. So going to the fair, I remember a buddy of mine and I would hide. We would get somebody to get us some alcohol. We would hide beer in the woods and liquor in the woods, and we would smoke a blunt and we would drink the morning that we were going to the fair. So we would have like a buzz when we got there. And we would drink hot beer that sat in the woods just to be able to tell people we were drinking that day. So I mentioned smoking a blunt. The first time I smoked weed was in 10th grade. It was one morning. I cut French class, and a buddy of mine, who also would be a buddy that I did a lot of other firsts with. A first line of cocaine was with him. First crack was with him. But he was a good dude. I mean, I wanted him to do so well in life, but yeah, we smoked a joint, and then I went to school, and people thought I was just so cool because I smelled like weed when I came in. I was making people laugh. And so, through, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, that just became what I was known for. I would smoke, I would drink, I would hang out with an older crowd, and that gave me a level of popularity that I enjoyed. But as I went through high school, I knew that I did not want to stay in that small town. I didn't connect with, that girl and I, we dated, but we didn't stay together. She moved on and found somebody that wanted to settle down and live, in that small town vibe. I just could not wait to get out. So my dad, he was a construction worker. He ran cranes, and so he was working in Augusta. And when I graduated in '97, he said, "All right, I'm gonna get you a job, boy." And so every morning I would get up really, really early and ride to work with him. And we would stop in the afternoon on the way home. And my dad and I never really hung out or connected, but after work, we would stop and get us a cold beer. And on a ride home, about halfway, we'd stop and get another cold beer. And that was our time together. And I think he needed that too, because he didn't have a relationship with his own dad to understand what being a father meant. It was paying bills, and putting a roof over your head and eating what was on the table. That was checking the box when it came to fatherhood. There wasn't like a lot of I love yous and comfort and support and all that mushy stuff that goes along with it too. I think he was just doing the best he could. And so that was our way of kind of connecting and bonding. We also played, he started learning how to play golf. I started playing golf in high school. I love golf. But that was how we connected. We would drink after work. When we first left work, we'd stop at this first gas station where they would cash our paycheck. We would get up a couple of beers. If we saw some folks there, we would talk for a little bit. He would introduce me to these guys. Of course, they were way older than me. And we would stop, it was an hour ride, so 30 minutes down the road, we'd stop at another gas station and get another beer. And when I say we got a beer, back then we called them double deuces. And so it was a 22-ounce can you'd get for like 99 cents. And we would drink those. And so there would be times, and I would hang out with friends. If I knew I was going home, I would try to power drink. So if I had two of those, and I was close to the house, I would not leave drinks with anything in them. Like I had to finish them. So it came a point when I got tired of that drive. I remember driving to work one morning, and I got pulled over on a Thursday morning by this cop in this small town on the way to Augusta for speeding because I was late for work. And then the next morning, I got pulled over by the exact same cop for speeding on the way to work to Augusta. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's time for me to move. So I think it was 1997, 1998. I just threw everything that I owned, did everything that I would need, because I'd found a roommate, a guy I was working with. I said, "Hey man, I want to come live in Augusta. How much is it going to cost me?" And he told me, and I could afford it. So I threw everything I had in this little Honda Civic, and I drove to Augusta one night during the week. And the next morning when I woke up, I was 3 minutes from the job, and that's when I really started being a young adult. So I moved to Old Town in Augusta, Georgia, and I thought, all these big houses were, and this big city I was in was, this was me. Like this was where I needed to be at. I was drinking a lot. I was drinking every weekend with the friends that I had made out at the place where I worked at. I had got a fake ID because I wasn't 21 yet. I was 19 and 20. I went back to school because they paid for it. So I was going to get my instrumentation degree, and but I drank every weekend during the week. Like if these folks wanted to go hang out, I lived in the city. If we were downtown Augusta, we went out all the time. So it was just, I was 20 in my 20s I was just having a good time. I got caught with a fake ID. And so they took that from me, which I turned 21 not too long after that. So I could drink anyway. Went and got my first tattoo downtown. And I had met this girl, and we were hanging out a lot. She was still in high school. because in Augusta on Washington Road, we used to just drive up and down Washington Road and talk to girls, and you know, it was so random because we didn't have phones and all that kind of stuff. So you would just listen to music. But yeah, we started dating, and she was younger, and I still hung out with this crowd. I decided that I didn't want a roommate anymore, so I moved to a little town called Beach Island, which is right outside of Augusta. And there's a joke: there's no beach and there's no island, but it's called Beach Island. And I had this little tiny trailer, and I'd made this new clique of friends. And so this is where I tried my first line of cocaine, was with this. Well, no, I tried cocaine with BJ. We put it, when I tried cocaine, we put it in our joints, but actually snorting it was in Beach Island for the first time. And I did that. I started doing that drug by myself. And so I was drinking by myself in the afternoon. I was getting cocaine and doing cocaine by myself. So much so that this younger group, I was now the older person that they were hanging out with. I think some of them were still in high school. Some of them were just gotten out of high school. But they gave me this nickname, Ski Cat. And so I had this cocaine nickname, Ski Cat, that I just had to live up to. You know, me and the little girlfriend broke up. I mean, we had a horrible relationship to be so young. But I truly think that first girl that I had in high school, that was like my first love. This girl was, I wouldn't say it was a love, but she made an impact on my life, because one day, me and her and BJ, the guy that I did all the firsts with, were coming back to Augusta, and I don't know why. Me and BJ had smoked a joint, and we were drinking in that same Honda Civic, and she was driving, and I reached over and I put my hands over her eyes while she was driving, like just I thought I was playing around with her, and she swerved and wrecked the car. And I remember waking up in the road, and my bone in my arm was sticking out. And so I was out of work for a while. We kind of were forced to break up after that. Her dad didn't like that, which I get that now, having a daughter. But it didn't change me. I mean, I was still smoking. I was still doing a lot of cocaine with these folks over in Beach Island, and just running 100 miles an hour. I mean, the first time I did acid was with this group. That was scary. I did not like it at all. I remember riding around with no clothes on except for like a pair of pants. And I'm not like into music. I mean, I love music, but I wrote a song, and it's weird because I can still remember the lyrics of that song, just like I can still remember that girl's address. I can still remember my dope dealer's phone number. It's just crazy, the things that stay stuck in your mind. And at one point, after that, or maybe it was before, I had a roommate and we lived in an apartment, and I met his girlfriend. And we all hung out together. And I was still drinking and smoking, and they would, after that car wreck, I got a little bit of money, and I bought this car, and it was a really cool car. And so they asked to borrow my car, and I think she had a little crush on me because I listened to Incubus, and I had weed in my car all the time, and her boyfriend had to borrow that car, and I think, I don't know. Well, I got fired from this great job that my dad had given me, or got me, and I really enjoyed working out there. But you can fail a drug test, and if you fail a drug test, you can fail one, and you get to come back to work after 30 days as soon as you can pass a drug test. But if you fail a second drug test, you're terminated. And that was the reason I switched to cocaine in my mind, that, you know, if I was smoking weed and it stays in you for 30 days, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this cocaine on Thursday roll the dice for Friday, like they're not going to drug test me, and then it'll be out of me on Monday. But I would use on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, thinking that, it would be out of me, but that's not the case. I failed a drug test. I was walked out of the gate after working there for like 5 years. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I remember being there when 9/11 happened. So I was on break at this place where I worked at, this plant. And it wasn't long after that I got fired. And I had a landlord, and the landlord said, look, if you can't make rent, you can't live here. And so I'm going to help you find another job. At this time, I was waiting tables. I was doing whatever it took to kind of make ends meet. But I went from making pretty good money to making nothing at 22 years old. Well, because of 9/11, the airports were redoing all their security, and they were creating this Transportation Security Administration, TSA. And I applied to be a TSA agent through a newspaper article. And I got a phone call like 2 months later. Hey, can you come take this test for us at the DoubleTree Hotel in Augusta? And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly where DoubleTree Hotel is, because that's the place. They used to have this bar in there, and that's where they took my fake ID. I said, yeah, I can be there. I know exactly where that is. So I took this test. It wasn't like an aptitude test. It was pretty much just, are you capable of working for us? I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. And I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to go get a real job again, a good job where I'm not waiting on tables, making good money. And they offered me this job where I would go all over America and do what they called mobile screening for these different seasonal airports. Like take Augusta, for example. I would fly here for the Masters. Well, I got on an airplane for the first time in my whole life when I was like 22, 23 years old. And I flew. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't buy any luggage on wheels, so I was lugging around these 3 gigantic brown suitcases through the JFK airport. But I flew from Augusta to New York City, and I did all this training in New York. And as soon as I got there, I was like, I've got to drink, because the drinking had become a part of who I was. Like, it helped me kind of calm down. I had, anxiety from, I guess, childhood and past experiences. And I guess the drugs, cocaine will give you that kind of anxiety. And so, yeah, I remember walking out the front door of this hotel, and I'm like, okay, I want to go see some places. Like, where's Times Square at? And the guy pointed, and he's like, well, you're in Times Square. So I was like a block from Times Square. So I got to go see and do all these things that I'd seen on TV in the small trailer in the small town. And now I'm there. I just thought I was the coolest thing. I remember traveling from New York to Pittsburgh was next. And from Pittsburgh, I got put with this team who I would travel with for a good bit. We went from Pittsburgh to Burbank, California. And these places I would stop at, I would meet these girls. I wasn't doing the right thing with these girls. I mean, I don't know. We were just having sex and drinking and partying all the time because we weren't responsible for anything. All we had was that work at the airport, and we would get off. We lived in hotel rooms. We lived in the hotel, and so everywhere I went, I would just get a new friend. So I traveled from Pittsburgh to Burbank. Burbank, the last night I was there, I'd met this sweet girl. She was very kind. I remember all these cool experiences in California. I was on a Candid Camera show on a Mexican television network. I actually saw movie stars in the airport. So, I mean, like, all these cool, really cool things were happening. So I thought I was supposed to stay in California. I applied for a bigger job to stay there. I didn't get it. But the last night I was there before I was told to go to the next place, me and some friends had went out. We went to this place called Sharky's all the time. And we were on like Highway 101 coming back out of Hollywood. And I was passed out in the passenger seat, and he was driving, and he passed out while he was driving and wrecked. and threw me through the windshield. That's how I got this scar on my face. And I had already been in a car wreck when I put my hands over that girl's eyes, and this arm had a plate in it. Well, I kind of bent that plate, so they had to do surgery on this. And this was close to Thanksgiving time. And I woke up like 5 days later in this general hospital, in one room with like 5 John Does. I was a John Doe because nobody knew where my stuff was at. I remember waking up and there was this gigantic, overweight Mexican guy across the room who did not like having sheets on him. So, I mean, all I saw was him, all of him, all day long. And I remember my parents walked in. I don't know how long I'd been out, probably 3 days. And it was a lot for them to come there because, one, neither one of them have ever flown. My dad is a huge smoker, and so he couldn't smoke for like 3 hours on that flight from South Carolina all the way to California. So, I mean, he wasn't excited about it. And then to get put in a car and zoomed all through traffic to get to this hospital to come get your son, I can't even imagine what they felt. But that's just where everything just kind of progressed. I was having fun. I was given all these opportunities, but I was drinking, and then now I'm starting to get in car wrecks, and doing drugs, and it was just crazy. So this was around Thanksgiving. We couldn't fly because of how much trauma I took to my head. They didn't want too much pressure on my brain, and so we had to stay there. I remember celebrating Thanksgiving in that hotel room with my parents, and then sometime after that, we got to come back home. Between the month of, the Christmas, before Christmas, we got to come back home. And I was in a cast again, and I had this big scar, and it, I still had hair then, and it had pulled my hair out. I'm bald, and I've shaved it now, but, there was a time where I had hair. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I healed up, I called him up. I'm like, look, I'm ready to go back out, because I'm back in Wagner, and I'm like, I don't want to be here. So my next stop was Ketchikan, Alaska. So I went to Ketchikan, Alaska. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen before in my life, but there was absolutely nothing there to do. Like, when I say nothing, it's like standing on a 54-acre jail cell. There was nothing to do. There was fishing for salmon and halibut, but it was beautiful. And then there was an airport that you had to take a boat to get to. I lived in a hotel room, and I drank every day, like every day. And their drink of choice was called duck farts, and it was layered alcohol. It was Kahlua, Bailey's, and then topped off with Crown. And we would shoot pool, and these Eskimos would sing karaoke at nighttime at this bar. But I did meet some cool people that loved music. This is when a couple of different CDs from the Foo Fighters came out, so we were rocking to that. We were listening to Pearl Jam, and I mean, I've always been into music, so I love listening to music when I'm high or when I'm drinking. I still do now, but I just don't throw in the high or drinking with it. But man, I was in Ketchikan for probably a year. Never got in any kind of car wrecks. They always gave me a car everywhere I went. So, I mean, I would go out and go exploring and just see these places. And I was just so blown away. Like, I could see myself living there after a certain amount of time went by. Like, it was just so boring, but I mean, it was so beautiful. But it was the first time I ever called Alcoholics Anonymous when I was in Ketchikan, Alaska. I was starting to, I mean, I'd always drank, and I've woke up next to like one night stands or in places I shouldn't have been. I mean, I've passed out and couldn't find my car and slept under the 5th Street Bridge, which was 2 blocks from where I'm sitting at right now. Or gotten in a car with people I shouldn't have gotten in a car with. But the first time that I actually said, okay, I can't remember what I'm doing. I have an issue, but it wasn't, I I needed somebody to tell me that this is what your issue is. You can't drink this kind of liquor because it erases your memory. So I was thinking that these duck farts were mind erasers, and I needed to go from drinking this layered brown liquor to a clear liquor. So in my stupid thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna start drinking vodka. I won't black out anymore. I'll tell you, you still black out. Blackout is from alcohol poisoning, and it's like once you drink enough alcohol and you poison the inside of your body, your body just, you don't remember these things. But that was my first experience with Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't like anything that they said, so I was not having it. I'm not doing any of that. Nothing. After Ketchikan, Alaska, I went to the extreme. So I was over here on this side of the world, and I went across America. I guess it would be this way. Across America down to St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. That was my next stop. In St. Thomas, we drank a lot of alcohol. Oh gosh, I can't remember what they're known for. It's not bourbon. Anyway, it's so cheap there. The place was beautiful, like on the beaches and all that. I lived in this hotel room that was like an apartment. It was beautiful on the beaches. The locals would get up and bathe in the ocean in the morning time. I just thought that was amazing. I saw these iguanas that would swim in our pools, and weed was everywhere. But like inside the town, it was dirty. It was filthy. Like pigs and goats at the red light. But man, we drank a lot, and it was like you had to like experience it. I mean, I was still in my 20s. I wasn't looking for a wife. Wasn't looking to be a daddy. I didn't want any of that. I wanted exactly what I had, which was freedom and alcohol and drugs. I wasn't like a big pot smoker, and I do a lot of cocaine out on the road. I did drink. And I didn't think I had a problem because good things were happening. Like I wasn't getting in car wrecks. The worst thing that would happen I would black out drunk and just not remember. But then I started dating this girl that was there, and she showed me like what it's like to date and go to like nice places. So like when I had these little girlfriends before in these small towns, there wasn't like nice restaurants to go to and nice wine to drink with your meal. And so I remember she was very kind, and she showed me, like some nicer things in life that you can do when you're drinking. And so I started drinking wine, thinking that, I've moved up in class. But that was just false hope, I guess. When I was asked, and I would stay at these places for a year, maybe sometimes 6 months to a year, but I was in Alaska for probably a year and then went back for a few months. And then when I left there and I went to the Virgin Islands, I was probably down there for about 6 months to 9 months, long enough that I would receive mail there. After St. Thomas, I was down in St. Thomas because it was Carnival. Remember, it was, I go to these hotels because it was busy seasons. I was in Ketchikan because they were launching their TSA program, and so they had no employees, and so we were training these employees when they were coming in. St. Thomas was for Carnival, and then it was coming up on April, so I was brought back to Augusta because Masters season was coming, and a lot of flights would come in to Augusta. And from that car wreck, I got an insurance settlement, the one where it peeled my scalp back and messed up my face and all that. So I bought my first little house in North Augusta, South Carolina with that check. I put some furniture in it. I was working at the airport, and like 2 years had gone by, from the time I got this job until, being in Augusta during Masters Week to work at the airport. And I remember working there at the airport, and I bought the house, got furniture, had this really nice car. And there was a website called, goodness gracious, MySpace. And then there's a dating website, Match.com. And so I remember using my work laptop, and I was getting on the laptop at nighttime, and I was, in these chat rooms, and this girl popped up, and I'm like, I know this girl. And it was the girlfriend of the roommate that I had, that I used to hang out with. And I remembered her name. And we started dating. I invited her over on like a Friday night. I wanted her to see my house. I wanted her to see the car that I drove. I kind of just wanted to impress her. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just this, young kid from a small town. I had traveled the world, or traveled America, and I was drinking wine and listening to music. And so I wanted my first impression to be really, really good. And I wanted to be able to make her laugh. I just wanted things to be different. So I invited her over for dinner. And so this is what that night looked like. I had her come over, and I had cooked a Stouffer's lasagna. It was a vegetable lasagna. I had got a box of White Zinfandel. That's how classy I was. And I had bought a Fleetwood Mac CD. I had just hung a swing on my front porch, and we had the best time. And I think it was because I tried so hard to show her how classy I was, but enough redneck hadn't worn off yet, because we were listening to Fleetwood Mac, drinking box wine, and eating Stouffer's lasagna. But we just had the best time. I was still working at the airport, and I got called into the office I don't remember if it was morning or afternoon, it doesn't matter. But my boss said, hey, 2 years ago when you filled your application out, you said you'd never been fired from anywhere. I'm like, yeah. And they said, well, that was a lie, because over the last 2 years, we've done a background check, an extensive background check. And we've talked to all your old neighbors. We know all your records. And we talked to all your old jobs, and we know that you were fired for weed use or marijuana use, and then you were fired for cocaine use. And so we're going to fire you now for lying on your application. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so I remember, I didn't know what to do. Me and this girl, we were dating pretty heavy. And I said, this is what happened. And she said, well, this is what we're going to do. You're going to give the keys to your house back to the bank. Give your car back to the bank. Come live with me, and I'll take care of you.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Recovery Valve podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow along on all of our social media platforms. A huge shout out to all of our sponsors. You can find a list of them in the show notes below, or on the screen you're watching on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Today's episode is brought to you by Roof Savers, Kendrick Pain and Body, Game Changers, City of Refuge, Augusta Magazine, Burrow Elijah Attorney at Law, Communigraphics, The Nonprofit Desk, Corbin Jones State Farm, Paradise Turf, Sally Kohler Photography, Atlas Health and Wellness, Dr. Rhonda Milner, Kendra Neal Studio, Augusta Dream Center, Newsom Electric, New Spring Church, Augusta Lawn and Turf, Candace Riddle Realty, Goldneck, Norval Fixture and Equipment, S&S Supplies, Belinda Thompson, Rhett Walker, Carpet Cleaning Pros of Augusta, Coleman Construction. And a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Valve podcast.